Hello, wonderful friends. Today, I'm going to read you a book from my own childhood. It's called McBroom's Ghost. Ghosts? Mercy, yes. I can tell you a thing or three about ghosts. As sure as my name's Joss McBroom, a haunt came lurking from our wonderful 1-acre farm. I don't know when that confounded Drybones first moved in with us, but I was suspicious last winter. An uncommon cold winter it was, too, though not so cold that an honest man would tell fibs about it. Still, you had to be careful when you lit a match. The flame would freeze, and you had to wait for a thaw to blow it out. Some old-timers declared that was just a middling cold winter out here on the prairie. Nothing for the record books. Still, we did lose our rooster, Syllabub. He jumped on the woodpile, opened his beak to crow the break of day, and the poor thing quick froze as stiff as glass. The way I reckoned it, that ghost was whisking about and got icebound on our farm. The young ones were the first to discover the pesky creature. A March thaw had come along, and they had gone outside to play. I was bundled up in bed with laryngitis. Hadn't been able to speak above a whisper for 3 days. I passed the time listening to John Philip Sousa's band on our talking machine. My, those piccolos did sound pretty. Suddenly, the young ones were back, and they appeared kind of strange in the eyes. "Pa," said our youngest boy, Larry, "Pa, do roosters ever turn into ghosts?" I tried to clear my throat. "Never heard of such a thing," I croaked. "But we just this minute heard old Syllabub crow," said our oldest girl, Jill. "Impossible, my lambs," I whispered, and they went out to frolic in the sun again. I cranked up the talking machine, and once more Mr. Sousa's band came marching and trilling out of the morning glory horn. Suddenly, the young ones were back, all 11 of them. "We heard it again," said Will. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," little Clorinda crowed. "Plain as day, Pa, out by the woodpile." I shook my head. "Must be Mr. Sousa's piccolos you're hearing," I said hoarsely, and they went out to play again. I cranked up the machine, and before I knew it, the young ones came flocking back in. "Yes, Pa?" Will said. "Yes, Pa?" Jill said. "You called, Pa?" Hester said. I lifted the needle off the record and gazed at them. "Called?" I croaked. Then I laughed hoarsely. "Why, you scamps know I can't raise my voice above a whisper. Aren't you full of mischief today?" "But we heard you, Pa," Chester said. "Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda," Polly said. "It was your very own voice, Pa, and plain as day." Well, after that they wouldn't go back out to play. They were certain some scaresome thing was roving about. Sure enough, the next morning we were awakened at dawn by the crowing of a rooster. It did sound like old Syllabub. But I said, "Heck Jones must have got himself a rooster. That's what we hear." "But Heck Jones doesn't keep chickens," my dear wife Melissa reminded me. "You know he's raising hogs, Pa. The meanest, wildest hogs I ever saw. I do believe he hopes they'll root up our farm and drive us out." Heck Jones was our neighbor, and an almighty torment to us. He was tall and scrawny, and just as mean and ornery as those Arkansas razorback hogs of his. He'd tried more than once to get our rich 1-acre farm for himself. It wouldn't surprise me if he was making those queer noises himself. Well, if he thought he could scare us off our property, he was mistaken. By the time I got over the laryngitis, the young ones were afraid to leave the house. They just stared out the window. Something was out there. They were certain of it. So I bundled up and marched outside to look for Heck Jones' footprints in the mud. Well, I had hardly got as far as the woodpile when a voice came ripping up out of the still air. "Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda." That voice sounded exactly like my own. I spun about, but there wasn't a soul to be seen. I don't mind admitting that my hair shot up on end. It knocked my hat off. There wasn't a footprint to be seen either. "Do you think the farm is haunted?" Larry asked at supper. "No," I answered firmly. "Haunts clank chains and moan like the wind and rap at doors." Just then there came a rap at the door. The young ones all shot looks at me, Mama too. Well, I got up and opened the door, and there was no one there. That's when I had to admit there was a dry bones dodging about our property. And mercy, what a sly prankster creature it was. When that ghost wasn't mimicking old Syllabub, it was mimicking me. Well, we didn't sleep very well after that. Some nights I didn't sleep at all. I kept a sharp eye out for that haunt, but it would never show itself. Finally, Mama and the young ones began to talk about giving up the farm. Then we had another freeze, and for 3 solid weeks that spirit didn't make a sound. We reckoned it had moved away. We breathed easier, I can tell you. There was no more talk of leaving the farm. The young'uns passed the time leafing through the mail order catalogs, and we all listened to the talking machine. "Pa, we'd dearly love to have a dog," Jill said one day. "You won't find dogs in the mail order catalog, my lambs," I said. "We know, Pa," said Chester, "but can't we have a dog? A big, shaggy farm dog?" I shook my head sadly. A dog would be the ruination of our amazing rich 1-acre farm. There was nothing that wouldn't grow in that remarkable soil of ours, and quicker than scat. I thought back to the summer day little Clorinda had lost a baby tooth. By the time we found it, that tooth had grown so large, we had to put up a block and tackle to extract it. "No," I said, "dogs dig holes and bury bones. Those bones would grow to the size of buried logs. I'm sorry, my lambs." The icicles began to melt in the spring thaw, and there came another knock at the door. The haunt was back. That night, the young ones slept huddled together all in one bed. Didn't I pace the floor, though? That door-rapping, rooster-crowing, me-mimicking dry bones would drive us off our farm, unless I drove it off first. Early the next morning, I trudged through the mud to town. Everyone said that the widow Witherby was a ghost seer. I called on her first thing. She was a spry little cricket of a lady who bought and sold hand-me-down clothes. But tarnation, her eyesight was failing, and she said she couldn't spy out ghosts anymore. "What am I to do?" I asked, as a litter of mongrel pups nipped at my ankles. "Simple," the widow Wetherby said. "Burn a pile of old shoes. Never fails to drive ghosts away." Well, that sounded like twaddle to me, but I was desperate. She went poking through rags and old clothes, and I bought all the worn-out hand-me-down shoes she could find. "You'll also need a dog," she said. My eyebrows shot up. "A dog?" "Certainly," she said. "How are you going to know if you ran off that haunt without a dog? Hounds can see ghosts. Mongrels are best. When their ears stand up and they freeze and point like a bird dog, you know they're staring straight at a ghost. Then you have to burn more shoes." So I bought one of her flop-eared pups and started back to the farm, carrying a bushel basket of old shoes. As I approached the house, I could see the young ones' faces at the windows. Piccolos were trilling merrily in the air. But dash it all, when I opened the door, I saw that no one had a recording on the talking machine. "Confound that haunt," I exploded. "Now it's imitating John Philip Sousa's entire marching band." Of course, the young ones couldn't believe I had brought home a dog. It was their first time all winter long I saw smiles on their faces. Didn't they gather around him, though? They promised to keep close watch so he wouldn't bury any bones. I didn't lose any time burning that bushel of old shoes. What a mercy! That was an infernal strong smell. I could imagine that dry bones holding its nose and rattling away, never to return. Every day after that we walked the pup around the farm, and never once did he raise his flop ears and point. "By ginger," I exclaimed finally, "the old shoes did it. That haunt is gone." By that time the young ones had decided on a name for the pup. They called him Zip. He grew up to be the handiest farm dog I ever saw. That rich soil of ours was rarin' to go, and we started our spring planting, raised a crop of tomatoes and 2 crops of carrots the first day. In no time at all, the young'uns taught Zip to dig a furrow, straight as a beeline, too. But our troubles weren't over when that ghost chased off. One burning hot morning, we planted the farm in corn. The stalks came busting up through the ground, leafing out and dangling with ears. I tell you, Heck Jones' hogs acted as if we had run the dinner bell. Mercy! They came roaring down on us in a snorting, squealing, thundering herd. Will, Jill, Hester, Chester, Peter, Polly, Tim, Tom, Mary, Larry, and little Clorinda, I shouted. And Zip! Run for your lives! Those hungry, half-wild razorback hogs broke down the stalks and gorged themselves on sweet ears of corn. Then they rooted up the farm looking for leftover carrots. Well, those razorbacks finally trotted home with their stomachs scraping the ground, and I followed along behind. Heck Jones, I said. He was standing in a cloud of flies and eating a shoe-fly pie. It was mostly made of molasses and brown sugar, which attracted the flies and kept a body busy shooing them off. Heck Jones, it appears to me you've been starving your hogs. Bless my soul, they don't look starved to me, he chuckled, shooing flies off his shoe-fly pie. See for yourself, neighbor. Heck Jones, I said stoutly, if you aim to raise hogs, I advise you to grow your own hog feed. No need for that, neighbor, he laughed. There's plenty of feed, and razorbacks can fend for themselves. Of course, if you hanker to give up farming, I might make an offer for that patch of ground you're working. Heck Jones, I said for the last time. I could hardly see him from the cloud of flies. You're mistaken if you think you and your razorbacks can drive us off, sir. Either pen up those hogs, or I'll have the law on you. There's no law that says I've got to pen my hogs, he said, finishing off the pie and a few flies in the bargain. Anyway, neighbor, no pen would hold the rascals. Well, I'll admit he was right about that. We fenced our farm, but those infernal hogs busted through it and scattered the pieces like a cyclone. We strung barbed wire. It only stopped them long enough to scratch their backs. Barbed wire was a comfort to those razorbacks. I tell you, we battled those hogs all spring and summer. We planted a crop of prickly pear cactus, and not even that kept the herd out. They ate the pears and picked their teeth with the prickly pines. All the while, Heck Jones stood on the brow of the hill eating shoe-fly pies and going, hee-haw, hee-haw. His hogs grew fatter and fatter. I tell you, we were lucky to save enough garden sass for our own table. Another growing season like that, and we'd be ruined. The summer came to an end, and we knew we were in for a more than uncommon cold winter. It was going to be a dreadful cold winter. There were signs. I remembered that the boys had gone fishing in late October and brought home a catfish. That catfish had grown a coat of winter fur. That wasn't all. After the first fall of snow, the young ones built a snowman. The next morning, it was gone. We found out later that snowman had gone south for the winter. Well, it turned out to be the winter of the big freeze. I don't intend to stray from the facts, but I distinctly remember one day Polly dropped her comb on the floor, and when she picked it up, the teeth were chattering. As things turned out, that was just a middling cold day in the middle of the big freeze. The temperature kept dropping, and I must admit some downright unusual things began to happen. For one thing, smoke took to freezing in the chimney. I had to blast it out with a shotgun 3 times a day. And we couldn't sit down to a bowl of Mama's hot soup before a crust of ice formed on top. The girls used to set the table with a knife, a fork, a spoon, and an ice pick. Well, the temperature kept dropping, but we didn't complain. At least there was no ghost lurking about, and Heck Jones's hogs stayed home, and the young ones had the dog to play with. I kept cranking the talking machine. Then the big freeze set in. Red barns for miles around turned blue with the cold. There's many an eyewitness to that. One day the temperature fell so low that sunlight froze on the ground. Now, I disbelieved that myself, so I scooped up a chunk in a frying pan and brought it inside. Sure enough, I was able to read to the young ones that night by the glow of that frozen chunk of winter sun. Of course, we had our share of wolves about. Many a night, through their windows, we could see great packs of them trying their best to howl. I suspicioned laryngitis. Those wolves couldn't make a sound. It was pitiful. Well, spring thaw came at last. I remember stepping outside, and the first thing I heard was a voice. "Hee-haw!" "What mischief are you up to now, Heck Jones?" I answered back. But as I looked around me, I saw there wasn't another soul on the farm. Then I knew. My hair rose, knocking my hat to the ground again. The door rapping, rooster crowing, me mimicking, hee-hawing ghost was back. "Zip!" I shouted, and we went tracking all over the farm. Voices popped up behind us and in front of us and around the woodpile. But that dog of ours never once lifted his flop ears. "Confound it," I grumbled to Mama and the young ones. "Zip can't see ghosts at all." The poor mongrel knew I was dreadfully disappointed in him. He lit out through my legs and dug a straight furrow into the farm quick as I ever saw. When that didn't bring a smile to my face, he zipped over to the corn bin and took a cob in his mouth. He'd watched us plant many a time. He ran back up the furrow, shelling the corn with his teeth and planting the kernels with a poke of his nose. "Maybe Zip can't see ghosts," Will said, "but he's a powerful smart farm dog, Pa. Can we still keep him?" I didn't have a moment to answer. As the cornstalk shot up, Heck Jones appeared eating a shoe-fly pie on the rim of the hill. At the same instant, his razorback hogs came thundering towards us, and that infernal haunt began trilling like a piccolo. "Run for your lives!" I shouted. We all ran but Zip. The corn was ripening fast, and he meant to harvest it. I started back out the door to snatch him up, but suddenly that prankish ghost changed its tune. It began howling like a pack of hungry wolves. I stood my ground, scratching my head. Sounds were breaking out everywhere in the air. As if howling and yipping like an entire pack of wolves wasn't enough, the haunt joined in with Mr. Sousa's entire marching band. I must admit it had those piccolos down perfect. You never heard such a howling, and didn't those hogs stop in their tracks? I tell you, they near jumped out of their skins. That ghost kept yipping and howling from every quarter. Heck Jones didn't have a chance to hee and haw. Those razorbacks turned on their heels. They trampled him in the mud and kept running. Though one of them did come back for the shoe-fly pie. My, did they run! I heard later they didn't stop until they arrived back in Arkansas, where they were mistaken for guinea pigs. They had run off that much weight. "Yes, my lambs," I said to the young ones. "Reckon we'll keep old Zip. Look at him harvest that corn." Well, we'd got rid of Heck Jones' razorback hogs, but we still had that dry bones cutting up. The young ones remembered to be scared and streaked behind closed doors. I kept scratching my head, and suddenly I said to myself, "Why, there's no haunt around here. No wonder old Zip couldn't spy it out." Glory be! It was clear to me now. There never had been a haunt lurking about. It was nothing but the weather playing pranks on us. No wonder we hadn't been able to hear wolves in the dead of winter. The sounds had frozen, and now all those sounds were thawing out. Well, it wasn't long before I coaxed the young ones outside again, and soon they were enjoying the rappings at the door and the yips of wolves and shotgun blasts 3 times a day from the chimney top. And didn't they laugh about Heck Jones's razorback hogs running from the howling and yipping of last winter's wolves? Well, That's the truth about our prairie winters and McBroom's ghost, as sure as I'm a truthful man. This is such a fun book, bud. I hope you guys enjoy this so much. See you again